So, as with any game that has been out for a while, over the last 5 years of Smash Ultimate being released, there has been a lot of talk about who is the GOAT, who is the greatest Smash Ultimate player of all time. So, starting off with our candidates, I have 4 players who we're going to be discussing in this video as candidates for the GOAT. Obviously, the number one candidate is the man that everybody probably thought of when you first asked this question. It's MkLeo. He has been probably the most consistent pick for the GOAT of Smash Ultimate since the very first Smash Ultimate Major. Obviously, his signature win being the first ever and only ever Smash Ultimate Evo in 2019, which is still probably the most iconic Smash tournament ever, in my opinion, since then. And he was ranked number 1 on the version 1 PGR, which obviously, is probably one of the most iconic accomplishments ever. I know everybody's seen the screenshot of just MkLeo first at everything, but looking through his set count, he has an 85% set count win, and he has a 75% game count win. Looking back at his tournaments, his very first placing was all the way back in January of 2019, and obviously his first big major win was at Genesis 6. This is his first ever S tier win. Genesis 6 back in February of 2019, a 2,000 man tournament, which he did end up winning. Now, obviously, if you just look at some of these wins here, he did reset the bracket coming from losers. This was the tournament with the famous Zachary set that I know everybody talks about, where you had Zachary versus Void, but beating some of these names, DeBuzz, Simsora, Leffen, Light, DeBuzz, and then Void twice in grand finals. Obviously, these are huge wins for back in 2019, and throughout the rest of 2019, it was very, very clear that he was the best player in the world, consistently winning or getting second place at S tier tournaments like Frostbite, and then finishing off the season. I don't remember exactly when the season concluded, but obviously, getting first at consecutive S tiers was enough to put him consistently in the GOAT level tier, and then he continued that performance, getting first on the second PGR as well through 2019. I mean, just look at this streak right here. First at every single tournament he's going to, regardless of the size. And then in 2020, the online era started to hit, and you see him competing in some of these juice boxes and these online tournaments, and you still see him placing, obviously, extremely high. He is still probably the best player in the world at this period of time, but over time you start to see the placements kind of drop off past 2021, which was the last time he was consistently and unanimously the best player in the world. Genesis 8 still getting first place, right? Still completely destroying the competition. But as we scroll closer to this year, 2024, and a little bit of the late 2023, you start to see some of the placements drop off. You see him getting 17th, 13th, dropping top 8s, which was something that previously Leo just didn't do. It was kind of a shoo-in that he would at least place top 8, but near the end or middle of 2023, you see him getting 9th, consistently placing outside of the top 8. He would still have extremely good performances, but it would be like 7th instead. And the last time he won a big tournament was King Kong in 2000, and that was obviously in February of this year. But it has been a few months since he has won a major tournament, and so people, when talking about MkLeo as a whole, as his career, obviously had these 3 strongest years at the very start, but has kind of fallen off a little bit in the recent years, and people have been there was a long period of time where people were calling him washed, literally saying that, he doesn't have it anymore. And I think that is where it goes into our next player that I'm going to talk about, who probably has the second strongest case for being the GOAT, and that is Spargo. Now, obviously, Spargo did not start off as strong as MkLeo did, but a lot of people are under the impression that he was just like a nobody at the start of Smash Ultimate and then randomly came onto the scene and started winning everything, when that isn't true at all. In 2018 and 2019, he was already a pretty well-known player in his region, and even at Genesis, which was the very first Genesis 6, you can see here that he did place in the top 50. He placed 49th out of 2,000, which is an extremely respectable performance, and it did show the growth that he could have going online. But as you can see, even in 2019, before online tournaments were very popular, he was competing in all of these online tournaments, competing in Naifu Wars, all of these huge online tournaments. So that is where the Spargo growth kind of came from, is that he was just this ridiculous online grinder in a time where online tournaments weren't super popular. So as you move into more, he starts getting better placements, 33rd at EVO 2019. As you can see, the growth is happening. And then when online tournaments came on in 2020, he started placing very high top 8s, and then the reign of dominance begins late 2020, where he just starts getting first at every single online tournament. All of these tournaments that are all online, coin boxes, juice boxes, whatever online tournament you could find, Spargo was entering and he was getting first place. So in 2021, he started to make his name known as a top 10 player, and then obviously he went on these sorts of runs in late 2021 where he is competing for the spot of #1 player in the world, and that performance has carried on pretty much. I mean, just look at this. He get the lowest placement he has in over 20 tournaments is a 12th place at a random ultimate singles 10 smash league, and it just doesn't stop from there, only dropping a few performances at coin boxes, which, you know, if you are a anti-online warrior, you probably won't count them as much. But this reign of dominance has continued all the way until 2024. So he almost has an opposite sort of pathing as MkLeo. He started out off less as strong as he was still growing as a player, and he was still extremely young in 2019, and he's only gotten better and better, and now consistently competes for the #1 player in the world spot every single year since like 2020 and the online era really started. Whereas MkLeo obviously started off a lot stronger, but has kind of fallen off a little bit in placements and has not really competed for the #1 player in the world title for the last year and a half or so. So Spargo's case really comes from his reign of dominance, especially if you consider the fact that even online he was the most dominant player, and the fact that he has consistently continued that in offline tournaments would show for those people that, you know, he is the best player overall, and he is the greatest player just based on his pure amount of, like, if you look at his percentages compared to Leo's, he has played so many more games and he still has a higher win, he's played so many more sets and he still has a higher percent set count of 85.63 to 85.05%. He has a lesser game count, but he has played, this is over 7,000 games compared to Leo's almost 5,000 recorded games, and obviously there are games that are not recorded on the player database, but Spargo consistently keeps up this high win rate even though he has played so many more sets, and that is because he is an online grinder. Now, the next person that I want to talk about is somebody that people probably don't put in these conversations as much, but I do want to go over his case, and that is Tweek. Now, Tweek has played a lot less compared to both Spargo and Leo in terms of set count and game count. As you can see, he barely has over 1,000 recorded sets, as he is not as much of an online grinder of these online tournaments. He typically just plays in like singles training, and he does a lot less of like pure online tournament grinding. But Tweek has probably been the most consistent player. He never has had really a drop off or any slow start. He has been competing ever since the start of Ultimate, and is still competing in the end of Ultimate, or where we're at currently 5 years later. As you can see, in 2019 and 2018, he did win. I think he won like the first ever I think Let's Make Moves right here was the first ever considered major or 400-man tournament in Smash Ultimate, and he did win this in 2018. This was just weeks after Ultimate, or I think it was a month or so after Ultimate's release. But obviously, you know, Genesis 6 first S tier tournament, placing 9th, just outside of top 8, winning Frostbite 2019. This is when he beat Leo. So obviously, even when Leo was the undisputed #1 player in the world, Tweek was still winning tournaments over him, which is a huge case for his chance in the GOAT debate, and obviously placing well at S tiers throughout the years. And just as we scroll through this, even through online tournaments, obviously you can see there was this kind of period in 2020 where he played online tournaments and he was still winning. So this shows that even through these online tournaments, he was still able to compete, winning the Northeast, the Smash World Tournament Tour when that was going on. He did win the NA Northeast Qualifier, 2,160 entrants. He is winning these huge tournaments. He won, placing second at Riptide in 2021. This was some of the first in-person tournaments after the pandemic, and as you can see, he has continued his performance throughout 2022, 2023, and 2024. Most recently winning Get On My Level X, Get On My Level 10, the Canadian fighting game tournaments, just in May. And he has, I believe he has won another tournament since then, just not recorded on the player database. But Tweek's biggest case for this is his consistency over the last 5 years. He has consistently been in top 5 talks. I don't know if he's ever dropped outside of top 5 in results. He might have, just because I'm sure there was a period of time, especially in online era, where he was not entering as many tournaments, therefore he was not ranked as high. But as you can see, obviously he was the second place player behind MkLeo in the version 1 PGR, and he was third place. I don't know who was second. It might have been Simsora in the version 2 PGR, but obviously he has been extremely consistent and probably the most consistent player over Ultimate's entire period, in probably the either best or second best region in NA. But yeah, that's his GOAT. But yeah, that takes us to our final person, someone who people have probably not been talking about as much this year because he has not traveled as much. But the newest entrance into the GOAT debate has been Acola in recent years, and that is just because Acola's dominance over the past year and a half, ever since he first started competing in 2021, has just kind of been unrivaled. Obviously, he plays Steve, the best character in the game, but even just looking at the set count, he has only lost 62 recorded sets. And that number alone is just insane. He has over a 90% chance of winning a set. Obviously, his game count is a little bit lower because he does win a lot of 3-2 sets, but he does clutch out the sets. And obviously, if you just go back to look, his first tournament wasn't until 2021. So this is 2 years into Ultimate starting period. He did not play for 2 straight years. So that is going to be the biggest downside to his GOAT debate, that he has really only been playing the game and competing for 3 years compared to these other players who I named who have been playing for 5 years. However, if you just look at his resume, it's just first and second. The lowest entire ranking that you could find on his entire database is a 9th out of 16, which was just a boot camp. So out of a big tournament, he either places first or he places second. None of these results that are huge tournaments, all of these Mausumas, all these Smash Cons, he won Smash Con 2023, getting second at all the Kakabiris, or winning the Kakabiris or the Umaboras, he just wins everything, right? He wins everything. And his results are insane, and he came up in a way similar to Spargo just a little bit later, starting out as an online grinder. He basically grinded on Elite Smash the entire time. I think he holds the Elite Smash record for most consecutive wins. It was some insane, I believe I made a video on it. I don't remember the exact number, but he holds the record for the most consecutive Elite Smash wins, and proved to the world that online grinding was a real thing, at least with Steve. You know, Steve is the best character in the game by far, and he has utilized it to his advantage to kind of create the most broken player that we've seen in all of Smash Ultimate's history. It seems that for a period, he was virtually unstoppable. No one could beat him. He was guaranteed to win almost every tournament, bar a few second places, third places here and there. But as you can see, his streak was insane. So obviously, after viewing these 4 players' resumes, you have a few things to weigh on. Do you value dominance more? If you do value dominance, your pick would be Acola. Do you value consistency more? If you value consistency, your pick would probably be Tweek. If you value peak, your peak would probably be MkLeo. And if you value some of all of that, your pick is probably going to be Spargo. But there is an important piece that we haven't yet looked over, and that is the head-to-head, because in a GOAT debate where all of these players are playing at the same time, head-to-head does matter. So obviously our first head-to-head is MkLeo versus Tweek, probably the biggest rivalry that this game has ever seen. The first ever set that they had was at Glitch 6, in which MkLeo, I believe MkLeo won this one, yeah. Genesis 6, they basically played in the first year in 2019 at every major tournament. They always had a set. Obviously, their biggest and most famous set is Grand Finals of EVO 2019. If you have not watched that set, I heavily recommend you stop this video and you go watch it right now. It is probably the most iconic set of Smash Ultimate history, and it honestly proves that even in Leo's year of dominance, how far Tweek pushed to be that #1 player in the world. But obviously, as we can see, it is a 14-11 set count in favor of MkLeo. But as you can see, the games are so extremely close. Only 3 games separate them. A 51% win rate compared to a 49% win rate of Tweek. And as you can see, the matchup has changed a lot over time. Starting off, now currently it is typically a Byleth Diddy matchup, but it used to be a Joker Wario, Joker Pokemon Trainer, Lucina Wario. Like, you can just see the meta shift between these 2 dominant players. But as you can see, MkLeo does hold the record over Tweek, but it's an extremely close record. Now, the next important matchup that we're going to see is Spargo versus Acola. For those of you that are fans of Acola and the GOAT debate, I do not have good news. Spargo owns Acola. And this is not an exaggeration. Spargo has beaten Acola 7 times out of the 8 times that they have met. A 7-1 victory, and it's not like the sets were close. Spargo has a 23-8 game count lead over him in all of these sets. Spargo pretty much dominates. Cloud Steve, Cloud Pyramithra, Cloud anything. Spargo just destroys him with Cloud, and Acola hasn't really shown to have an answer. There have been a few times recently where Acola has beaten Spargo, and if you watch any of those sets, you'll see how much that means to Acola, as Spargo has kind of been his kryptonite, and has basically won almost none of these, but Spargo completely does have the record over Acola, and that could hurt his argument in the GOAT debate. Now, Spargo versus Tweek is actually a relatively even set count. Spargo does own the record of 12-9, but just like the MkLeo Tweek games, the games are extremely close at 46-39 in favor of Spargo, and the matchup has changed a lot over time. As you can see, the meta has kind of shifted with both of them, similar to the MkLeo Tweek head-to-head. Over time, Tweek used to defeat Spargo Spargo used to defeat Tweek for the most part, especially in the time of like 2022, 2021. But in recent times, Tweek has kind of fought back and gained a few sets. There's Super Smash Con 2023, Luminosity Big Moves, and Port Priority. But obviously, online, Spargo typically wins. And at Collision 2024 and Genesis X, both events where Spargo placed extremely high or won the event, Tweek finished right below him and typically lost those sets. So this matchup goes in favor of Spargo. Now, the only player that Spargo does have a losing matchup to is MkLeo. So if you're on the MkLeo side of the GOAT debate, then this is a big plus to your argument. Spargo does have a losing record of 17-22 in terms of set count, but the games have been extremely close, 79-88, only around the 47% range. And as I said before, the meta has changed a lot. Spargo typically uses Cloud or Pyramithra, but has tried other characters on Leo, especially in times where that hasn't really been the case. For a long time, though, at the beginning of Smash Ultimate, as you would expect, when MkLeo was the best player, MkLeo beat Spargo pretty much every single time, pretty handily. But as the online era kind of started and Spargo started to strike for the best player in the world, he started beating MkLeo more and more. So this has kind of been a battle of two sides. At the beginning of Smash Ultimate, it was heavily in favor of MkLeo, and kind of near the middle of Smash Ultimate, it became heavily in favor of Spargo. Nowadays, it's more of a toss-up, as MkLeo has been putting up some better results in recent years, especially in the last few months. But this matchup is Spargo's only losing matchup to any of these three candidates. Now, the final matchup that I think is interesting is Tweek Acola. Tweek has not played Acola that many times. However, in the 5 sets that they have played, Tweek is 0-5 in the registered game count. He is 7-15. Acola has had Tweek's number for a while now. Tweek just doesn't seem to have the patience to play against Steve, especially Steve camping, which is what basically Acola knows to do against Tweek. And while Tweek's characters can be good with patience, that's not really Tweek's playstyle, which means he does end up getting frustrated and typically throws sets. Some of these sets were extremely close or winnable in terms of Game 3 performances, but Tweek just decided to be aggressive or play differently midway through the set, and that ended up losing him. It also doesn't help that Acola came near the end of Smash Ultimate in the time of online era, where he was grinding online for the most part and becoming the best player in the world, number one ranked player in the world, at a time where Tweek was not playing online tournaments that much. But even in recent years, in the tournaments where Tweek has bad performances, it's typically because he goes against Acola and is sent to losers, or he has to play some matchup that isn't favorable to his characters. But Tweek does not have any wins so far over Acola, and we'll see if that continues to be that way. But after going through all 4 of these players' cases for the GOAT debate, I'm going to give you my personal rankings. So in first place for this debate, I do have MkLeo. I think just the notoriety of being MkLeo does hold some weight because he was known as the Smash Ultimate player, as the GOAT, and I think his performances in the beginning of Smash Ultimate, I think that does hold a very large portion of the weight. His clear dominance for the first 2 years as just the undisputed number one player is something that really only Acola has matched in the last 2 years. There's never been a time where Spargo and Tweek were the best player in the world, undisputed for 2 straight years, without much competition. Now, while Tweek was competing with MkLeo, MkLeo was still overwhelmingly the number one player. There was nobody that was, Tweek wasn't really touching him. There was no real argument that Tweek was ever the better player than him, especially for the first 2 years of Ultimate. And even after MkLeo had this sort of fall that he was dealing with for a while, he came out of post-COVID still the best player in the world, getting first places at everything, competing with Spargo for the best player in the world. Even after this kind of fall off in 2023, he has consistently gotten good placements and won tournaments this year, which I think gives him that longevity that he really needs to complete his GOAT case. Now, I actually have a tie in second place. I would tie Spargo and Acola for second place in terms of this GOAT debate, simply because Acola's dominance is just so undescribable that he would be the GOAT if he had had these performances and he started playing in 2019. Then he would be the undisputed GOAT. There would be no argument. But that longevity is an important thing, and the fact that he's only played for 3 years and has put up these results is enough to put him in this GOAT debate, right? The fact that he's even here while only playing less than, almost 650 less than recorded games, and only playing the game for 3 years competitively. But it's undeniable that he is the best player in the world. He has been the best player in the world for the past 2 years now, which is something, like I said, that only really MkLeo and Spargo have done, puts him firmly in second place. But because of the head-to-head and the results that Spargo has been able to consistently place, especially over the online era, still into today, competing with Acola for the best player in the world for the last 2 years, I do believe Spargo is also tied at second place for the GOAT debate. That winning record over Acola, somebody who is supposed to be so dominant, nobody can touch him, the fact that Spargo has repeatedly owned him does give him a lot of credit in terms of, I'm on the same level of Acola or higher, which I think puts him at second place. But the fact that he didn't have such a strong start at the beginning of Ultimate, simply because he was a growing player, it's unfortunate, but he doesn't have that sort of boom that MkLeo does, which is why I'm going to sit him at second. However, if he continues to perform at the level he is, he could have that longevity argument if the game, depending on how long the game continues to go on competitively, and that's if any other Smash game ever comes out. But I would put him a little bit higher, maybe say in a year or so, the ranking could change. And in third place, I would have Tweek. Tweek honestly would have a much better case if he had some better head-to-head records against players like Acola and Spargo, but because he doesn't, he gets that third place. He's never been the number one ranked player in the world, which does hurt his case as the GOAT. He's always been the consistent second guy or consistent third guy, but his longevity and his consistency cannot be overlooked, which is why he's even in this conversation in the first place. So yeah, that's my ranking. MkLeo first, Spargo and Acola tied for second, and Tweek third. But let me know what you guys think. Who is your GOAT of Smash Ultimate? And do you agree with the criteria that I used, or would you view it differently? Do you value dominance or consistency more? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time.